Suzanne, welcome. I hand over to you.
Thank you. No slides and no clicker. So this is the impromptu part of the stage today. Here's the clicker. That's great. Thank you. All right. So it's working for me here. So I will just go forward. Oh, nope. Well, I'm going to talk about the state of business travel with or without slides. So we'll see how I do today. I think it'll come back at some point. GBTA is a global organization. We partner with VDR. We partnered for over 10 years. We're very proud to be partners. We have about a dozen partners globally, as well as our own US, Canada, Mexico, APAC, France and Italy organizations, and represent about 8,000 members globally. And where we see travel today is, you'll hear me say it maybe twice, but we're trying not to compare ourselves anymore to 2019 because the recovery in many ways with spend has already happened. And you'll see some of that in my slides, which just appeared. So as we go forward, you'll see some changes on this slide about how things are different from before. And really, as we think about what has stayed constant, is that global business travel is really a force for good. It's a force for good with economies, local destinations, for companies, for governments, and certainly for people, all of us, who are part of this great industry. I'll do a quick poll here. How many of you live locally and took public transportation here today? A few of you. How many of you got to Berlin via train this week? Good luck getting home, but never mind. How many of you flew to Berlin? All right, it's almost an equal distribution if you didn't look around. So we have a very mixed crowd. That's awesome because that often is what we see when we're in business meetings today, and we'll talk a little bit about what the current state is of business travel. What we do annually is an economic analysis of hundreds of economic indicators across 77 countries, as well as the industries that fuel this industry. And we call it our Business Travel Index. Our last one came out last August. We'll do another one in time for our annual convention in Atlanta in July. And we'll go over what some of those numbers are that we saw at this time last August. So what we saw from 22 to 23 was a huge jump, 47% increase year over year in spend, not volume, but in spend in 1920, and I went back a century, 2022. And in 23, we saw a 32% increase year over year. So as we think about how it will start to flatten now, we almost hit the 2019 number last year in terms of global spend, which in 2019 was 1.4 trillion. And as we look forward, we see this year that we will actually, in all likelihood, surpass that 2019 level. This is spend again. And so as we think about the correlation between volume, which has not recovered to the same extent and may not, for some years, it gives us time to actually create some sustainability solutions that can help us feel better about all of those business trips that were going on. And the one sure thing is that if we stopped all business travel today, nobody would invest in the business travel sector. And we need business travel to keep fueling the kinds of innovations. Even when we talk to government officials, we remind them that when they're traveling to Brussels or Washington or in from another part of the UK into London or to Ottawa, that those are actually travel for work trips, and those are an important part of fueling the way that our planet works. As we think about the regional mix, this is a 2023 projection that we see that APAC is still about almost half, 42% of the world's global business travel happens there. A lot of that fueled by domestic travel in China, of course, but across the region, it picked up a lot last year. The rest, then North America and Western Europe, and the rest is taken up with some of the other regions that you see there. And then in terms of what we see in terms of top 15 countries, we were projecting that from the prior year, where the US was number one, that China would take over that number one spot again in 23. But I'm guessing that China probably didn't hit 39% year-over-year growth in terms of business travel last year. And so if they're anything less than 30%, they are in the second space. Again, it's an awful lot of business travel, so it's not to be underestimated, the business travel that happens to and from and within China. Germany, number 3, has been pretty consistent. What we also saw here was the first time that Indonesia has ever shown up on this list, and the Netherlands is back on the list. Is there anybody here from the Netherlands? You're back. You're on this list for the first time since 2017. We also like to know, for the last couple of years, what do business travelers say about their business trips? And these are not road warriors. We surveyed 4,700 business travelers across the world, 4 major regions, and this is what they said. 82% say that they need to do business travel in order to get their jobs done. I think that's still a critical part of jobs that they do, and why they travel won't be surprising. It's really still for training, sales, partner meetings, and conferences. They average 3.5 nights on each business trip, so they're staying a bit longer, and they're doing probably fewer trips per year than they used to. And the last piece, because this conference is very much about leisure travel in more ways than corporate, blended travel is probably here to stay, and we also confirmed that, of course, with the business travelers. They are doing more blended trips than they did pre-COVID, and they're also, any hospitality companies in here, they tend to stay at the same property when they are adding on nights for their stay. So they're staying in the same property, and that certainly gives opportunities to the hoteliers in the room as well. Why people travel for work is often associated, and it can be associated, to sales. And so we've been tracking over several years the amount of sales that happens in the corporate world compared to a dollar spent on travel. And you'll see that huge spike when people were still meeting mostly remotely, not traveling a lot, and then you'll see that mountaintop come down a bit. And with inflation, it's actually not that far away from where it was back in 2019. So things are normalizing in quite a predictable way. Now I'll look at some more recent information. We look every quarter at the insights and the sentiment of travel buyers like Christoph, as well as the suppliers who are members at GBTA. And what we saw is certainly that looking back at 2023, the vast majority, 83%, said that they had more volume last year than they had in the prior year. Now, this doesn't say how much more volume, but they certainly are traveling more trips. And as we think about what the outlook looks, this is now looking at 2024, we know that if you add 21 and 66%, 87% are saying that they will spend the same or more this year for corporate travel than they did last year. And this was exclusively a travel buyer question. So how does that compare then to volume basis? So what we see here is that more will be traveling the same amount of trips but spending more. So there is still a disparity between the amount that they're spending and the volume of trips that they're actually doing. But it's still a very healthy in terms if you're a supplier, and a muted response if you're a buyer, as you're still concerned about spend, but also the sustainability requirements that might be coming either from central governments like the EU or from your own CFO office. We also asked about how people are working these days. How many of you go into the office every day? There's one proud hand. There's another one. Okay, I see some more. How many of you work in a hybrid situation? You're in the office some days, you're okay. So this is indicative. You are just like this pie chart. The vast majority of people are in a hybrid situation today, and why that matters in terms of what we are tracking, that hybrid environment means that travel managers are changing their policies because there are new ways and new expenses in the ways that we track and the ways that might be within policy or without policy. And some of the reasons or the kinds of policies that are being changed or considered to be changed are listed on this slide. We'll make this available for any of you afterwards. And even though back 5 years ago, someone was predicting that internal travel would be dead. Nobody would travel anymore for internal meetings. A quarter of our travel buyers are actually spending more at their companies for internal travel than they were last year. So culture building, recruitment, keeping good people on your teams. You mentioned labor. This is a key piece of keeping people interested, not just in the industry, but actually in your own company. So companies are seeing that internal travel is really a smart investment as well. So what do we see ahead? Because what got us here won't get us to the next 5 years. And I'll talk about 3 broad trends ahead. The first one is that broader forces continue to play a role here within the corporate business travel industry. And in this space, it's certainly the economy. The economy is always has a direct correlation to the amount of corporate travel that we see companies willing to do. When inflation is high, trips go down, but they're still spending. When there's economic recession looming, belts tighten, and we see that happen consistently. But what we've also seen is that economic indicators look pretty good. Depends. Like every quarter, there's a new prognosis, but I think we did not hit that dark recession that everybody was predicting last year. The other broad force here is certainly sustainability. And as we think about what rules are happening in Brussels, what kind of rules are happening in other governments, including Washington, sustainability in terms of measurability and requirements is key, as well as ultimately what employees are asking of their companies and how we demand responsibility as we go forward. And as we think at GBTA, the investment is certainly critical in a private and public environment. For us to fund innovation, we need certainly more public money, and then to have innovators come from private sector as well, sometimes from public, but often from private, to be able to make sustainability solutions available that probably don't even exist today. Innovation beyond disruption, because I think everybody knows the term disruptive innovation. We're thinking here about innovation that has to do with tech. It could be AI and the way that automation is coming forward. Chat GPT and generative AI can change the way that customer service happens in the future, and the way that simple tasks or more and more complex tasks can be handled in an automated way. But this also has to do with distribution, because distribution, we think, is something that surely we figured it out by now. Distribution will be one of those things that needs disruptive innovation as well, as we think about what is coming forward. And there's also disruption in the way that we think about who our prime members have been in the past. So we're hearing from a lot of suppliers that with big corporate accounts tightening their belts, but also being very able to turn on and off the travel spigot because their policies are so secure. Small and medium businesses are now some of the wind in the sails of suppliers as they think about the companies that are growing into a managed travel program. And so certainly that kind of new environment is key for us as well. And the third area that I'd like to focus on here is the groups and meeting space. Because we're all here, we're at a conference, we're at a meeting. This is business travel. You're all on a business trip, even if you just commuted from home. And as we think about what those purposes are, transient travel versus groups and meetings, there is absolutely a blend of purpose. And more as we think about what those purposes are that people are traveling, that is one of the other areas for innovation as well. And the third and last but not least area is the people. And as Christoph mentioned, people are key to this industry. Some in the audience may be new to the travel industry, and I'll warn you that if you try to leave, you're going to come back, because this industry is contagious. So upskilling and reskilling, as we think about the people on our teams, that's certainly key as we give new opportunities and new ways for people to grow in their careers. But travelers are the ultimate reason why we do our jobs every day. And we have to think, even on a business traveler perspective, why are those travelers on the road? What would get their jobs done better? How can they be efficient, productive, and stay well? Because that still, I think, will be a theme in our discussions for years. The traveler is certainly really key as we go forward. And ultimately, as we think about everything as that compounds, we have to collaborate in new ways as we think about how to solve some of the biggest problems that we are facing. They're not easy. Technologies that power planes without emitting carbon just aren't there yet. So we have a long future ahead to mitigate, to measure, to figure out what some of those solutions are and how to work better together as we think about, again, how not to stop business travel, but how to make it the right amount and right kind of business travel to make sure that the investments happen in the future. I think one thing I'd like to show you here, and I don't know if I click this, if this is going to make it go, but I might need some help behind. This is the Sora engine from OpenAI. I don't know if any of you have seen this. The text on the left is the only prompt that they gave her, and she created this wild video, which looks very realistic. Of course, she doesn't look like she's on a business trip, but she could be. I think as we think about how this could change the world of travel forever, it may first impact leisure, but as we think about the stories that we tell in business meetings, to be able to tell a visual story with data rather than just data on charts, there's so much ahead, I think, in the way that we can liven up our world and think about the stories that we tell. Because ultimately, business travel is about telling stories as well. How many of you have had terrible experiences on a business trip? Okay, come on. Some of you have. I have. And guess what? They're great stories when you're at dinner with colleagues or you're telling your family what you do for a living. And those stories become great stories that you can either use to make fun of yourself if you made the mistake or to complain a little bit about the industry when it wasn't your mistake. And storytelling ultimately is really what we do in business to be able to drive our businesses, our governments, and certainly our careers as we go forward. So with that, I wish you a very good ITB conference. Keep traveling with pride and make sure that you're noting when you can do a sustainable part of your journey. Please do that as well. Thanks so much.